Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to explore John Scotus Erigena.
Oh, an excellent choice.
He's considered by many to be the most important Western thinker of the entire early Middle Ages.
It's true. A really remarkable figure.
We've got excerpts from an academic text all about him, so
Sounds perfect.
get ready to unpack some seriously intriguing ideas.
I'm ready when you are.
Okay, so for someone so influential,
Hmm.
Erigena's personal life is surprisingly obscure.
You're not wrong.
Almost like piecing together a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
It really is.
It makes you wonder, why is that?
Well, we only have a few reliable biographical details about him.
Really?
Most of what we know comes from a monk named William of Malmesbury.
Okay.
He lived much later, and let's just say,
Yeah.
William might have had a flair for the dramatic.
I bet. Like that story about Erigena having dinner with King Charles the Bald.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
2 students are there, servants bring out a platter of fish,
Uh-huh.
and Erigena grabs the 2 biggest ones for himself.
Can you imagine?
The side-eye from those students must have been priceless.
Well, King Charles actually pointed it out.
He did.
Yeah, he mentioned the inequity.
What, like, hey, not cool.
Sort of. 1 small fish for himself, 2 big ones for Erigena, and
Poor
then,
man.
again, 1 small fish left, 2 big students.
Oh, that's funny.
It's a good thing Erigena was known for his wit.
He must have had a pretty clever response to smooth that one over.
It's not recorded, unfortunately.
Too bad. Then there's that story of his death.
Oh, right.
Supposedly stabbed to death by his own students with their pens.
Yeah, it's a bit dramatic, don't you think?
Seems a bit over the top.
Scholars think William might have borrowed that tale from Seneca,
Who's Seneca?
a Roman philosopher who met a similar end.
Oh, so not very reliable then.
Perhaps not.
Well, we might not have all the day-to-day details,
True.
but we do know Erigena was Irish.
Yeah,
But his work really flourished in France.
exactly. Under the patronage of King Charles the Bald.
And that was no coincidence.
Not at all.
This was the era of the Carolingian Renaissance.
Right.
There was a huge surge of interest in learning and scholarship.
People were eager to engage with new ideas, you know?
After centuries where intellectual life had really stagnated.
It had been a long time.
It was like Europe was waking up from a long sleep.
That's a great way to put it.
I can only imagine the excitement that must have been in the air.
It must have been palpable.
It sounds like the perfect environment for someone like Erigena to thrive.
Oh, absolutely.
And it sounds like he was really involved in the court's intellectual project.
He was deeply involved, in fact.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, for one, he played a key role in translating important Greek theological works.
Okay.
That was incredibly important, bridging the knowledge gap between the Greek East and the Latin West.
I see.
He was also deeply involved in some pretty heated theological debates.
Oh, I bet.
A real intellectual powerhouse.
So his life might be a bit of a mystery, but his work is all about exploring the deepest mysteries of existence.
You could say that.
And he was a master of words.
Oh, without a doubt.
Deeply learned in what were called the liberal arts, right?
Absolutely.
Remind me, what were those again?
So in the medieval period,
Yeah.
the liberal arts were the foundation of education.
Mm-hmm.
They were the essential skills for free thinking, they believed.
Okay.
They included subjects like grammar, rhetoric, logic,
Yeah.
arithmetic, geometry, music,
Oh, wow. A real range.
even astronomy.
So, like, their version of a core curriculum.
Yes, you could say that.
And Erigena was an expert in all of them.
He was very impressive.
He even wrote commentaries on Marcianus Capella's The Marriage of Philology and Mercury,
Oh, I love that one.
which is an allegory about, well, all those subjects. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
About the liberal arts themselves.
A walking encyclopedia.
And in many ways, yes,
And this mastery really set him apart, didn't it?
it did.
Like with his fluency in Greek.
Oh, that was huge.
Very rare in Western Europe at the time. It allowed him to directly translate works by figures like Gregory of Nyssa and Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite.
Exactly.
And that had a huge impact.
A huge impact on the theological landscape, yes.
Then there's his masterpiece, the Paraphysian,
Ah, yes.
but which his title is in Greek.
He was a real fan of the language.
You can tell. What does it mean, by the way?
It translates to on the natures.
On the natures, okay.
It's a monumental work.
In what way?
Erigena attempts to explain the entire universe
The entire universe.
through the lens of what he calls nature.
That's ambitious.
Incredibly so. It's incredibly complex as well.
I bet.
And it's structured as a dialogue
Like a conversation.
between a master and a disciple.
Interesting.
It's possible he was trying to capture how he actually taught.
Oh, that makes sense. He was a renowned teacher.
That's right.
So what are the main ideas? This nature he keeps talking about.
Well, at the core of the Paraphysian is Erigena's idea
Okay.
that all of reality can be understood
Huh.
through 4 divisions of nature.
4 divisions. Okay, I'm going to need a roadmap for this one.
All right, so the first division is that which creates and is not created.
Okay, so that's God, right?
Yes, God is the ultimate source of everything.
Makes sense. What's this?
Then there's that which is created and creates.
What's that?
These are the primordial causes.
Primordial causes.
We can dive into those a bit later.
I'll come back to this.
The third is that which is created and does not create.
Okay.
This is the world as we experience it, the physical realm around us.
Got it. So like trees and rocks and stuff.
Exactly.
The last one.
The fourth division is that which neither creates nor is created.
Wait, that sounds like God again.
You're right, it represents God.
But how can it be both the first and the last?
This time it's God as the ultimate end, the final destination of all things.
Okay, so he's basically created a framework for understanding how everything from the smallest grain of sand to the vastness of the cosmos relates back to the divine.
That's exactly it.
It's incredibly ambitious.
It is, and it gets even more intriguing when you consider that the manuscript of the Paraphysian contains corrections made by a mysterious scribe named Nicephortinus.
Nicephortinus.
Was this a helpful student? A rival scholar? We might never know for sure.
Another mystery. But speaking of mysteries, let's talk about the heart of Erigena's philosophy.
All right.
His understanding of God, dialectic, and his controversial stance on predestination.
Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff.
This is where things get really interesting.
Buckle up.
Erigena wasn't afraid to challenge conventional thinking.
He wasn't.
His ideas often sparked debate and controversy.
He was a real provocateur.
Let's start with his concept of God.
Okay.
He was really drawn to negative theology, right?
He was, yes.
Can you explain what that means for our listeners who might not be familiar?
Sure. So negative theology argues that we can't truly define God through positive attributes, like words like all-powerful or all-knowing. They're ultimately inadequate.
Okay, so what do we do then?
Instead, we can only approach an understanding of God by saying what God is not.
What God is not, huh? That's interesting.
Almost like describing a vast, blinding light.
Yeah.
By talking about the shadows it casts.
So instead of saying God is light, you'd say God is not darkness.
Exactly.
It's a way of acknowledging the limits of human language.
Yes.
Our ability to comprehend something as vast and mysterious as God.
Precisely.
So basically, Erigena was saying, we can know that God exists, but we can never fully grasp what God is.
You got it.
Which makes me wonder, how did he even try to understand God?
Good question.
If words fail us, where do we even begin?
Well, for Erigena, the key was dialectic.
Dialectic, okay.
A method of philosophical inquiry that relies on reason and logic to arrive at truth.
So through reason, we can get closer to understanding God.
He believes so.
Even if we can't fully define God.
That's right.
Fascinating. So tell me more about this dialectic.
He believed that by carefully examining different perspectives and working through apparent contradictions, we can come to a deeper understanding, the structure of reality itself.
So it's not just about arguing for the sake of arguing.
No, not at all.
It's about refining your understanding through careful reasoning.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
And what's really remarkable is that Erigena applied dialectic to everything.
Everything. Like what?
Even to his interpretation of the Bible.
Oh, wow.
He saw each created thing as a kind of light.
Okay.
If studied carefully, could lead us to a greater understanding of God.
Beautiful.
It's about actively engaging with Scripture, thinking critically, and allowing those ideas to spark your own journey of discovery.
I bet that didn't make him very popular with the religious authorities.
You're right about that, especially his views on predestination.
Oh, right. That was a hot topic back then.
It was a major point of contention in the 9th century.
To understand why, we need some context.
Yes, the idea of predestination.
Go on.
It was this idea that God had already decided
what?
Who would be saved and who would be damned.
Regardless of what they did in life.
Regardless of their actions.
That's a lot of pressure.
It was a very intense debate.
So where did Erigena land on all this?
He strongly disagreed with the idea of double predestination.
Double predestination.
That God decided both who would be saved and who would be damned.
Got it.
He really emphasized free will instead.
Meaning?
The idea that we have a genuine choice.
In how we live our lives.
Exactly. And that God's grace is there to help us.
So, not to force us into one outcome or another.
More like a divine nudge in the right direction.
Not a cosmic puppet master pulling strings.
Exactly.
So he believed that God offers us a path to salvation.
Yes.
But ultimately, it's up to each individual
to choose whether to walk that path.
And that's where grace comes in.
Yes, it's not something that overrides our free will.
Right.
But a kind of divine support that helps us make the right choices.
Okay, I'm starting to see why that would have ruffled some feathers.
It definitely challenged the established dogma.
He's saying we're not just pre-programmed robots playing out a predetermined script.
We have a real role to play in our own destiny.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the most mind-blowing aspects of his thought.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
His idea that the universe is not only emanating from God,
right,
but also ultimately returning to God.
Like a cosmic boomerang.
It's a powerful image.
It is.
And this is where he talks about deification, right?
Yes.
The idea that creation, including humanity, is on a journey back to a state of union with the divine.
Exactly.
We're not just souls going to heaven when we die.
It's deeper than that.
We're in a process of becoming more like God.
That's the idea, although it's important to understand, he wasn't suggesting that we become equal to God.
Right.
It's more about a process of spiritual evolution.
Okay.
Shedding our limitations and realizing our full potential as beings created in the image of God.
I see. And he even talked about a double return, right?
You did, yes.
Like some experience a more general return.
To a kind of paradise, maybe?
While others achieve a closer union with God.
A more profound union, yes.
It's all very thought-provoking.
It is very complex and nuanced.
So how did Erigina's contemporaries react to all these ideas?
Well, it was a mixed bag.
Really?
Some were deeply impressed by his intellect.
I bet.
And his boldness in challenging the status quo. But others saw him as dangerous, even heretical.
Makes sense. When you're a true innovator, you push boundaries.
And that's bound to make some people uncomfortable.
So what about his writings? Were they widely read?
They were both influential and controversial.
Meaning?
Well, his work was later condemned in the 13th century.
Really? They banned his books?
You could say that. Perhaps his ideas about God and creation were just too radical for some people.
Censorship at its finest.
But despite this, his work continued to circulate.
It did.
And even experienced a revival of interest later in the Middle Ages.
It's amazing how ideas can endure even when people try to suppress them.
It's a testament to the enduring power of thought.
And it makes me wonder, if Erigina were alive today, how do you think he'd apply his unique perspective?
What do you mean?
To the challenges we face in the modern world?
Oh, that's a great question.
What would he say about things like artificial intelligence, climate change,
right,
or the vastness of the cosmos as revealed by modern science?
Oh, it's impossible to know for sure, but I think he would be exhilarated by the new discoveries and challenges.
Really?
His mind was so open and inquisitive, always seeking deeper understanding.
Yeah, he seems like that.
I have no doubt he would find ways to connect his philosophical insights to the contemporary world.
What do you think he'd say? Maybe he'd find a way to bridge the gap between science and religion.
That would be amazing.
Or offer a new perspective on humanity's place in the universe.
I like that.
Or, he might just tell another hilarious story about fish.
You never know. Whatever he'd have to say, I think it's safe to say his legacy continues to inspire us today.
His legacy of intellectual curiosity and spiritual exploration.
Absolutely. That's a perfect place to pause.
Okay.
In part 2 of our deep dive.
Yeah.
We'll delve even further into Erigina's thought.
Sounds good.
And explore his unique interpretations of the biblical creation story and his profound ideas about humanity's place in the grand scheme of things.
I can't wait. As we explore Erigina's thought, I think it's helpful to keep in mind that context of intellectual excitement.
Oh, you mean like the Carolingian Renaissance?
Exactly. It wasn't just about rediscovering old texts.
Right.
It was about wrestling with big ideas, trying to synthesize knowledge from different traditions.
I see. So Erigina was right in the thick of things.
Oh, absolutely.
Drawing on Greek philosophy, Christian theology, and his own deep insights.
To try to understand the universe.
And humanity's place in it all.
Exactly.
Those 4 divisions of nature, that's what really captured my imagination.
They're pretty mind-blowing.
Such a bold attempt to explain how everything fits together.
It really is.
And remember, he outlines all this in the Paraphysian,
Right.
And it's structured as a dialogue.
It is a conversation between a master and a disciple.
You can almost picture them sitting in a candlelit scriptorium.
Debating the nature of reality.
It makes you want to grab a quill and join in.
I know, right?
So let's unpack these divisions a bit further.
Okay.
We talked about the first one, that which creates and is not created.
Right. God as the ultimate source.
But it's not a simple concept, is it?
Not at all.
Eriugena brings in negative theology.
To try to explain it?
He says we can't define God with positive attributes.
It's about acknowledging the limits of language.
Our human understanding when it comes to the divine.
So instead of saying God is this or God is that, we focus on what God is not.
Exactly.
So by focusing on what God is not, we get a better sense of his infinite nature, his otherness.
Precisely. It's a way of approaching the divine.
Okay.
With humility and awe.
Recognizing our limits.
Our finite minds can never fully grasp the infinite.
Which makes me wonder about the second division.
Which one?
That which is created and creates.
Ah, yes, the primordial causes.
Are these like intermediary beings between God and the material world?
That's a great question.
It gets to the heart of it, I think.
One of the most challenging aspects of Eriugena's philosophy.
You think so?
It suggests that God has endowed creation itself with a kind of creative power.
So there's a chain of causality.
Linking back to the divine source.
Okay, I think I need a metaphor here.
Sure, what are you thinking?
To help me wrap my brain around this.
Okay, how about this?
Yeah.
Imagine a playwright creating a play. They have the idea, the characters, the plot, but then they hand it over to the actors.
To bring it to life.
Exactly. The actors interpret the playwright's vision.
Right.
But they also add their own creativity.
So God is the playwright.
Yes, and the primordial causes are like the actors.
Bringing the play to life.
In a way, yes.
I see. So they're not independent gods or anything.
No, not at all.
So like expressions of God's creative power.
Working through the fabric of reality.
It reminds me a bit of Plato's theory of forms.
Interesting.
Those perfect eternal essences that exist beyond the physical world.
It's unlikely Eriugena had access to Plato's writings.
But it shows how some philosophical questions transcend time and cultural boundaries.
Exactly.
And then we get to the third division, that which is created and does not create.
Right. This is the world we're familiar with.
The realm of physical objects, plants, animals.
Things we can see and touch.
This is the material world, always changing.
Constantly evolving.
But for Eriugena, it's not just random stuff.
No, he sees a deeper meaning.
A tangible manifestation of God's creative activity.
Working through those primordial causes.
So everything we experience, the beauty of a sunset,
the complexity of light,
even a ripe strawberry,
it all points back to the divine source.
But it's also the realm where we experience separation from God, right?
It is.
Where sin and suffering come in.
Because of free will.
We have this incredible gift of choice.
But it also means we can make bad decisions.
Decisions that lead us away from God.
Creating disharmony in the world.
Eriugena would say humanity chose to turn away from God.
Right, which resulted in a rupture in creation.
We became caught up in the illusions of the material world.
And forgot our true nature.
Like we got lost in a labyrinth of our own making.
But don't worry.
Oh.
Eriugena offers us a way back.
To God.
Yes. Through the fourth division of nature.
That which neither creates nor is created.
This is the culmination of his vision.
The ultimate return to God.
A state of perfect union.
What he called deification. It's not just about heaven then.
It's about a transformation of our being.
A return to that state of harmony with the divine.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that he talks about a double return.
What's that?
The entire cosmos is returning to God.
Oh, okay.
But also, each individual soul is on that journey.
So two journeys happening at the same time.
The cosmic return and the individual journey.
But what does this deification look like?
Well, he doesn't give us a step-by-step guide.
No.
But he emphasizes cultivating virtues.
Virtues. Like what?
Wisdom, love, compassion.
These are the pathways back to God.
For Eriugena, yes. There are qualities we cultivate through our choices, our actions.
It's not about passively waiting for a miracle.
No, it's about striving to become more like God.
In our thoughts, words, and deeds.
It's about aligning ourselves with the divine will.
Both individually and collectively.
Exactly, and this is where free will is so important.
Right, we have the capacity to choose this path.
To participate in this grand return.
It's all connected.
It is.
It reminds me of what you said about Eriugena's approach to the Bible.
Oh, right, his dialectical method.
He didn't just read scripture passively.
He actively engaged with those ideas,
looking for deeper meaning.
And he does this most explicitly in the Exameron.
Exameron, what's that?
Where he delves into the 6 days of creation.
From Genesis.
Exactly.
So he's looking for the allegorical meaning.
The deeper truths hidden in the story.
And this is where those primordial causes come back in.
They do. He sees each day of creation as a stage in the emanation of the divine.
Into the material world.
With those primordial causes acting as intermediaries.
Shaping the universe.
According to God's plan.
So the creation of light, the separation of the waters, it's not just random events.
They're symbolic representations of this grand creative process.
Okay, so for example.
He interprets the creation of light.
Yeah.
As symbolizing the emergence of the primordial causes.
The blueprints for all things.
Exactly.
And the separation of the waters.
Represents the division between the spiritual and material realms.
The differentiation of creation.
Into distinct forms.
It's like he's weaving together biblical imagery, philosophical concepts.
His own unique insights.
To create this incredibly rich tapestry of creation.
And somewhere in that tapestry is humanity. Trying to find its way back to the source.
And that's where his ideas about humanity's place come in.
Right. He believed that humans are microcosms of creation.
Meaning.
Reflecting the divine image in their nature.
So we carry the potential for both good and evil.
The capacity for separation from God and union with God.
Like little universes within ourselves.
Capable of reflecting the complexities of the whole.
And that's why this journey of deification is so crucial.
Yes.
It's not just about individual salvation.
Right.
It's about restoring harmony to the cosmos.
Bringing the microcosm back into alignment with the macrocosm.
It makes me think about how our choices, even the small ones, have ripple effects.
Extending beyond ourselves.
We're part of this interconnected web of being.
Exactly.
Our actions can contribute to the harmony or disharmony of creation.
That's a profound insight.
It captures what Erigino was trying to convey.
He wasn't just a philosopher in an ivory tower.
Right.
He cared about the world, believed humanity had a role to play.
In its redemption.
Exactly.
It's amazing how relevant his ideas still feel today.
I agree.
We're still grappling with those same questions.
About God, existence, humanity's place.
It's a testament to his brilliance.
His ideas resonate with us.
Because they address those fundamental human longings.
For meaning, purpose, connection.
He offers a vision of hope.
A reminder that even in a world with suffering and separation, there's the possibility of returning to wholeness.
To unity.
Exactly.
But how did his ideas survive all those centuries of condemnation?
Well, there were always those drawn to his brilliance.
Even if they had to read his work in secret.
Even then.
And later on, his ideas saw a resurgence.
During the Renaissance, for example.
Why that?
There was a renewed fascination with Greek philosophy.
Oh, right, and Erigino knew all about that.
He became a source of inspiration for humanists.
A bridge between the ancient and modern worlds.
Precisely.
And his influence can be seen in all sorts of movements.
Like what?
His emphasis on the immanence of God.
Right, the idea that God is present within creation.
Resonated with mystical traditions.
And his concept of deification.
Striving to be more like God.
Found echoes in Renaissance humanism.
And even in modern spirituality.
It's fascinating to see how his ideas have been reinterpreted.
Over the centuries, always finding new ways to speak to us.
But what about today? Is he still studied?
Are his ideas still debated?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, there's been a surge of interest in Erigino.
Really?
In recent decades, scholars are still unpacking his thought.
It's like we're finally catching up to him.
Perhaps.
And it makes sense.
Why?
We live in a time of rapid change.
Technological advancements, globalization.
And an awareness of interconnectedness.
The world we live in is closer to Erigino's vision than ever before.
I never thought of it that way.
It's an interesting thought.
And it suggests his message is even more relevant now.
It could be.
He reminds us we're not isolated individuals.
Right.
We're part of a vast, interconnected web of being.
He challenges us to look beyond our narrow perspective.
And recognize the unity underlying the diversity of creation.
Exactly.
And he encourages us to embrace that journey of deification.
To strive to be more like God.
Not in an egotistical sense.
Of course not.
But in a way that reflects wisdom, love, compassion.
It's a call to live a life of meaning and purpose.
That contributes to the healing of the world.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
It brings us back to our question.
What question?
If Erigino were alive today, what would he say to us?
A question worth pondering.
What do you think he would say?
I think he would encourage us to embrace complexity.
The ambiguity of the world.
Never stop asking questions.
Always be open to transformation.
He would remind us that the journey is as important as the destination.
That the true measure of life is not in material things,
but in the growth of our souls.
And the depth of our connection to the divine.
Those are the things that truly matter.
So, Erigena's ideas, they weren't always met with open arms.
You could say that. There was definitely some pushback.
I mean, eventually, his work was condemned by the church, right?
It was, in the 13th century.
What were the specific sticking points? What made his ideas so dangerous?
Well, one of the big ones was his idea of deification.
That we can become like God.
Right. To some, that sounded a lot like heresy.
Like we could be equal to God.
Which, of course, went against traditional Christian teachings.
I can see how that would be misinterpreted.
Especially back then, religious doctrines were very strict.
Right. And his ideas about God in general.
Especially his negative theology.
I mean, that must have raised some eyebrows.
At the time, people thought of God in very concrete terms.
Specific attributes, powers.
And Erigena comes along saying God is unknowable, a mystery.
A radical departure, for sure.
It was. And then there was predestination.
Oh, right. He didn't exactly toe the line there.
By emphasizing free will and grace.
He was basically saying we're not just puppets.
In the hands of fate.
We have a choice.
The capacity to shape our own destinies.
And that's a message that's still controversial today.
It is. It raises so many questions.
About responsibility, good and evil.
The meaning of our existence.
If we're really free, what does that say about God?
Exactly. Erigena's work forces us to confront these questions.
That's why he's still relevant after all these years.
He's not giving us easy answers.
He's making us think.
Inviting us to question, to discover.
But how did his ideas even survive?
Centuries of condemnation.
Were there people who kept his work alive?
There were. They were drawn to his brilliance.
Even if they had to read him in secret.
Exactly. And later on, his ideas experienced a resurgence.
A resurgence when?
During the Renaissance, for example.
Why then?
There was a renewed interest in Greek philosophy.
And Erigena was a master of that.
He became a source of inspiration.
A bridge between the ancient and modern.
Precisely.
His influence can be seen in so many movements.
His emphasis on God's immanence, for instance.
God being present within creation.
Resonated with mystical traditions.
And his concept of deification.
Striving to be more like God.
Found echoes in Renaissance humanism.
Even in modern spirituality.
It's amazing how his ideas have been reinterpreted.
Over time, speaking to different generations.
But what about today? Is he still studied?
Oh, absolutely. There's been a surge of interest.
Really?
In recent decades, scholars are still unpacking his thought.
It's like we're finally catching up to him.
Maybe we are.
It makes sense, though.
Why?
We live in a time of rapid advancement.
Technology, globalization.
A growing awareness of our interconnectedness.
The world we live in is closer to Erigena's vision than ever.
It really is. He reminds us we're not isolated.
We're part of a vast, interconnected web.
He challenges us to think bigger, to see the unity in our diversity.
And to embrace that journey of deification.
To strive for wisdom, love, compassion.
To live a life of meaning and purpose.
A life that contributes to healing the world.
That's what Erigena calls us to do.
So if he were here today...
What do you think he'd say?
He would encourage us to embrace complexity, to never stop questioning.
To be open to transformation, to see the journey as important as the destination.
To realize that true fulfillment isn't found in material things.
But in the growth of our souls and our connection to something greater.
Well, on that note, we've come to the end of our deep dive.
Into the world of John Scotus Erigena.
We hope you've enjoyed exploring his ideas.
And that you'll continue to ponder them.
Long after this episode is over.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those spirits adventurous.